Congressman, always good to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you. You too.
Everybody on the committee complimented the Inspector General for what they called a thorough report. But after his testimony this morning and what you heard, do you think it went far enough?
Well, it's important to keep in mind what his job is and what it is not. And for those of us who believe in restraint and staying in the box that you're supposed to be in, his job is to investigate malfeasance, corruption, mismanage it within departments. He does not have the power to implement changes. He can recommend them. When you say go far enough, I mean, I kind of concluded, I opened and concluded with my concern, which was that Lanny Breuer seemed to have emerged unscathed from the standpoint of discipline. He's not unscathed in terms of analysis, but he was the criminal chief, and he's still the criminal chief. And near as I can tell, one person at DOJ has lost his job as a result of Fast and Furious, and that is inadequate to me.
Yeah, and I mean, you really hit on that, and I think you hit on exactly what a lot of people are thinking. How is it that people like Jason Weinstein, who worked for Lanny Breuer, head of the criminal division, resigns? Breuer is still there, and there's no indication at this point that the Attorney General is going to tell him he needs to go.
No, in fact, he said the opposite. He's a political appointee. He has connections to this administration and previous administrations. And only when there's enough public outcry and public disgust that someone who, I mean, imagine this scenario, okay? I mean, I asked Mr. Horowitz about it. The answer is I don't recall reading it. Okay, well, you don't have to be a prosecutor to know. The answer is either yes or no, and you would recall whether or not you read it. So putting the word recall in there is a fudge word. It's like at this moment. I don't recall at this moment, or probably. It means nothing. He forwarded this demonstrably false letter to his personal email account. He's not a historian. He's not an archivist. He doesn't collect DOJ letterhead. What purpose did he have for forwarding it? To read it. So he read it, and it went out, and it remained uncorrected for 10 months. He knew about gun walking. You can argue it's his job to supervised the wiretap application process, which also was heavily criticized by the Inspector General. So how he still has his job is befuddling to me, but that's a political calculation that people have to factor into this November.
Yeah, and I mean, on this whole issue, and again, wiretaps was a big issue, the issue of executive privilege. Now that the internal investigation is over for the most part, the Attorney General claims he's been vindicated. What about the president still using executive privilege? I mean, even the IG said executive privilege was unfounded and unnecessary.
I'll give you one better than that. Even yesterday, the Department of Justice produced another 300 pages of documents. They wouldn't give it to us when we asked for it, when we could actually do something with it last fall. They give it to us yesterday. So the Inspector General, because he's not a judge, he's not going to rule on the assertion of executive privilege. We have to wait until an Article III federal judge makes that determination. It is very instructive, though, that the Department of Justice let the Inspector General look at documents that he would not let the rest of us look at.
And the Inspector General said everything I review was relevant, and you should have reviewed it too.
Yes, that was a very important line, that it was relevant. Now, he also kind of pointed out correctly, it's not his job to determine whether or not something is protected by executive privilege. He can have an opinion, but ultimately the only opinion that matters is the judge's opinion and the American people's opinion.
You know, the White House, he talked about how the White House refused to share internal communications, that they wouldn't let them talk to White House staffer Kevin O'Reilly. I mean, and that begs the question again and again. What is it that this administration has got to hide?
Great question. Typically, when you don't want people to talk to law enforcement or investigators, it's not because it's good news. I mean, if it's good news, you trot them out there. You give them a ride to the deposition. So Chairman Issa has more information about it than I do. He suggested that Mr. O'Reilly is in a foreign country. I don't know whether he is or not. I know this. We have this neat little thing called a telephone where you can actually talk to people even if you're not in the same room with them. So why the White House sees the need to not let us talk to someone that an ATF agent emailed while this was going on, again, that's there are our framers. You know, Constitution Day was a couple of days ago. Our framers were genius in the way they set this up. There are checks and balances, and at a certain point, the people get to weigh in, and that comes in about 2 months.
Yeah, but it took 19 months for you to hear, you know what, you should have had those documents.
At 19 months, and if we had listened to the Department of Justice, I want you to go back to February of 2011. I want you to assume that Grassley gets this letter from DOJ. What if we had believed him and just let it go? Mm-hmm. What if we had just said, okay, well, you say it's not happening. You're the Department of Justice. You're not supposed to lie to us. We'll just let it go and move on to something else. Mm-hmm. What if we had believed them? So Darrell Issa and Lamar Smith and Chuck Grassley are taking all of this criticism for pursuing a political agenda. Guess what? The Inspector General agreed with them and not with the Department of Justice and not with my colleagues on the Democrat side who thought that this was a witch hunt. This was a legitimate exercise of oversight.
And yet you have the Attorney General saying that he was vindicated.
That's sad.
Even the AG wouldn't go there. Well, the IG, excuse me.
I mean, vindicated if you mean I wasn't charged.
Right.
Vindicated if you mean I haven't been fired yet. But I can tell you this, I did manage. It was a very, very small DA's office. We had 25 attorneys. And I don't know if you remember, I asked Horowitz about the duty to supervise. Lawyers, believe it or not, are supposed to abide by a code of professional responsibility. And one of those rules is that supervisors have a duty to supervise people under them. There have been district attorneys and prosecutors who have been sanctioned and disciplined for not doing a good job of supervising and managing people under them. So if reading this report and seeing the deficiencies in his own department, if this Attorney General feels like he was vindicated, he's got a very different definition of vindication than I do.
And is he going to be back if Obama gets reelected for 4 more years?
He and I don't run into each other very much, and when we do not discuss the future. My guess is he will not be for a couple of reasons. He's probably tired of it, and the president has somebody else he wants to reward. I just hope it is someone that is not overtly political. I just want that one department to be one where everyone can have confidence in it. And if Governor Romney is elected, I hope he will, by the same token, pick someone that has a background in law enforcement and fairness and objectivity so people can have confidence in that department.
And, you know, Congressman, I think also when you pointed out, and you said that even today, the Attorney General does not believe a dead Border Patrol agent killed by weapons linked to Operation Fast and Furious is something that should be brought to his attention. I mean, that is stunning. What an insult. What a disgrace to the men and women in uniform to hear that.
I want to have this little exercise with you. I was going to do it with Inspector General Horowitz, but I want you to assume you're the Attorney General and I'm your Chief of Staff. Ma'am, I need to let you know we had a Border Patrol agent who was killed last night. What's your next question?
Tell us what happened.
Well, he was killed with a gun. There were guns recovered at the crime scene. And I got to let you know, Madam Attorney General, these guns are connected to an investigation from our department. Then your response is going to be, I want to know everything there possibly
absolutely.
is to know about this. How you can live in a John Travolta bubble? He was in a movie where he was in a bubble for the entire time. I mean, this willful blindness that you can just close yourself off in a room and say, don't tell me anything. That way I can say I'm vindicated when things go to hell in a handbasket. That's not a management style that I've ever heard taught.
No, I mean, it's unbelievable. And I can only imagine. I know the Terry family said they were going to be watching this. What their reaction was when they heard you say that. I mean, do you really think all of their questions really have been answered?
No, I have met with parents of murdered children enough that their questions will never be answered, and there are questions that only can be answered in the next life. But our job is to get as many answers as we can, which, again, requires us to have all the documents, and this slow drip of 300 every time the IG issues a report is not going to get it done.
Mm-mm. And I thought with the inspector, I mean, he made very strong comments about all of this, but he made very clear, he said, we struggle to understand how an operation of this magnitude could not have been briefed to the Attorney General. I mean, he says he's vindicated, but I mean, that really summarizes what the heck went on. I mean, there were so many levels of mismanagement from top to bottom.
Well, I want to ask you this. I want you to assume that somebody is charged with kicking another person. Do you think the defense of it wasn't me, it was my foot would work? The ATF is under the Department of Justice. So necessarily the criminal division at the DOJ, leaders take at least as much responsibility as they should, and oftentimes they take more. To take a myopic victory lap yesterday saying, well, at least I wasn't sanctioned and at least I hadn't been indicted and at least I wasn't singled out. Your department on your watch was. I wouldn't be taking any victory laps if I was the Attorney General.
No, and as one of the congressman pointed out, what does this say to the whistleblowers? Hey, I'm not going to do that again because this all is about protecting the guys at the top and letting the guys at the bottom pay the price.
My hope and my expectation, I did ask the Inspector General, and his investigation is ongoing, and I am convinced, I've met with him privately and publicly, I am convinced that he is serious about protecting whistleblowers from any form of retribution and retaliation, and that would include making sure that their efforts don't go for naught.
On the whole issue of guns, he was asked about the motives behind Operation Fast and Furious. He said there was no evidence before the fact, but opportunistic after the fact.
Yes.
How do you, wasn't that still about trying to use it to pursue gun laws?
Yeah, I just think it's a difference between whether or not you think the people who were dumb enough to come up with Fast and Furious are smart enough to come up with a grand conspiracy. And I think what is clear is as soon as it became a fiasco, rather than talking about the fiasco, they wanted to pivot. I mean, I still have colleagues who want to pivot and discuss gun laws, which is why I also asked Horowitz, it's 5 years consecutive per gun. 1,000 times 5, I'm pretty sure, is 5,000. 5,000 years. You really need to strengthen the penalty? I mean, you don't think that's enough? I don't know many people that can serve a 5,000-year sentence and emerge on the other side of the prison gate. So it's not about current laws. They are adequate. It's about enforcing them.
Yeah, and the issue of media matters and the DOJ collaborating.
My guess is that this won't be the last we hear about that. Chairman Ice is the chairman. He can do what he wants.
Yeah, he told me he's going to be looking into it.
I would love to know from the Department of Justice. I'm just delighted that they took time away from suing my home state of South Carolina to do something other than plan their next lawsuit. But I'm very disappointed that they took time away to try to coordinate with the media on how to embarrass some of us that have been critical of them.
Yep, and they planted stories. I mean, they just didn't go back and forth. They gave them story ideas.
I promise you we are going to have a nice, full public hearing on that.
What's next? I mean, it took 19 months, as we've been talking about. Where does this go next? I mean, you said you were going to get more documents.
Well, we got to go to court. We got to get a judge to release the documents. The Inspector General is not through with his investigation, and Chairman Issa is not through with his investigation. This was important. I mean, the Inspector General report was important. And for everyone who said this was a political witch hunt, guess what? You were wrong. But it's not over. And it won't be over until I can answer all of your questions and all of Brian Terry's parents' questions. And right now I can't.
I mean, you sat in that hearing today. Did you find yourself scratching your head saying, 19 months?
That's why I started and ended with the same point.
Yep.
You shouldn't have to have an independent agency to make the Department of Justice do what it's supposed to do. I thought that's what the Department of Justice was
right.
An independent agency. But when you insert overt politics into an entity that is supposed to be apolitical, this is the result.
You know, you look to November, the election. Are you hearing from folks back home that this is part of the reason they're going to do what they're going to do?
I hear about Fast and Furious a lot when I am back home. I hear about gun rights a lot when I'm back home. But I am from a district that thinks the Second Amendment was written by the same folks that wrote the First and the Fourth and the Eighth and all the other ones, that our progressive friends like to point out. So I'm in a great district when it comes to protecting your right to self-defense and your right to keep and bear arms.
But where is the media on this story?
They are trying to find old videos of Mitt Romney at fundraisers or otherwise trying to blame all hell breaking loose in northern Africa over some YouTube video.
Yep. Congressman, as always, thanks so much, and thanks for fighting the fight. We sure appreciate it.
My pleasure. Hope you have a great day.